Okay, hi there everyone. Welcome to this first video in our series of virtual learning resources to help you develop your outdoor learning and your outdoor spaces. So this is part of the Be Wild project funded by the Heritage National Lottery. My name is Christina and I'm a tutor with the Field Studies Council out at lovely sunny Millport. So the Field Studies Council is an environmental education charity that is aiming to connect everyone with the environment to either help them appreciate its benefits, but also to help them learn how to protect it as well. So this week we're going to be covering a range of sessions to give you guys some inspiration to how to develop your outdoor learning and also how to use your local outdoor spaces with young people. So really hope you're looking forward to it. We've got a fantastic week planned out for you. And each session is going to have an overall theme that's then going to be kind of jam-packed with different session ideas, activities, tools and resources you can use with your young people in your space. So how each session will work, you'll get a live introduction from me at Millport, and we'll be kind of setting the scene, getting us thinking about the topic of the day. We'll then be introducing you to the main video, which will have the activity, session ideas, and then you'll be brought back to me live, where I'm going to be answering some of your questions live. So you can submit your questions to an email address, so send them over via email, and the email address is questions@field-studies-council.org. So you can submit those there. And all the sessions are going to include a range of different activities, and we'll also be discussing how you might adapt the sessions to suit different age groups, different environments, and we'll also be discussing things like health and safety and adequate management as well. So this first session, we're going to be looking at Marvellous mammals. So we're going to be discussing all the different activities you could potentially do to track mammals in your local area, or you can ethically or humanely trap small mammals with your young people. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing the world on our doorstep. So we're going to be looking at navigation skills, orienteering, as well as some small place setting activities. On Wednesday, we're going to be delving into the world of Minibeasts. We're going to be looking at insects and invertebrates, how you might develop sessions around those. Then on Thursday, we're going to be heading down to the coast to the rocky shore, where we're going to be looking at how you can develop sessions around that area. We're also going to be making that applicable to freshwater environments as well. And then finally on Friday, we're going to be looking at some bushcraft and wilderness skills. So I really do hope that you are looking forward to this week, and I hope you guys will get something out of it to use with your young people before the school goes back. So let's jump in with our first session, Marvellous Mammals. So we're going to be covering a few different things in this session. We're first of all going to start off with some key subject matter. So we're going to look at what a mammal actually is, what makes a mammal, and what mammals you can potentially get in your local space. We're then going to look and delve into more detail about how you might look for evidence of mammals, so how you might look for tracks and trails and droppings potentially in your local area. And we're going to look at how you might make something, a different tracking funnel, to lay in your local space to get even further evidence of mammal life in your area. But I'm going to finish off with one section where you might actually be able to humanely and ethically trap small mammals with your young people in your space. And we'll then finish off with how you might make your local area more friendly to mammal life. So lots of things to get done. First of all, let's have a little think as to what mammals are and where they are. So we have around 5,000 different mammals in the world, and they range from everything. They include ourselves, monkeys, tigers, elephants, whales, dolphins, all these different species that are really charismatic and that we are often really familiar with. But they are a fantastic group of organisms to look at with young people, and they're incredibly diverse, but they do share some key characteristics. So there are 4 characteristics that make mammals mammals. And before we get into them, we're going to do, first of all, a little quiz. So we've got a little quiz to start off each of these sessions. We want to make it a little bit more interactive and get you guys in the right headspace for the topic that we're going to be covering. Hopefully it doesn't bring back any kind of flashbacks of, lockdown Zoom quizzes with family members. But this first one is called Are We Related? So in a minute, I'm going to show you some pictures of different animals, and you've got about 10 seconds to guess or to work out if that is a mammal or not. Okay, so there'll be about 10 seconds, the picture will be up, and then I'll flip it around and you can see what animal it actually belongs to, or what group of animals it belongs to. So if you're watching this in a group, you can, discuss amongst yourselves. If you're doing this by yourself, just keep a little internal tally there. So here we go. We'll get started with our first quiz. Are we related? This is our first one. Hopefully you can see okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, hopefully nice and straightforward. Not a mammal, that is a slug, so it belongs to the mollusk family. Next, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. So we have here a buzzard, which is of course a bird, not belonging to the mammal category. Next here we have 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Not a mammal. We have here a little common lizard, which is of course a reptile. Next, I hate doing the little thing with this one. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So here we have bottlenose dolphin is in fact a mammal. And we'll discuss why in just a moment. That's one that's been tricked for some time. Next, everyone's favorite. 9, 8, 7, 6, 3, 2, 1. Just forget that. So we have hedgehog, which is of course a mammal, one of our favourite UK mammals. And then last but not least, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So here we have the little, this is a funny one. It's duck-billed platypus. It is a mammal, and we'll discuss the weirdness of duck-billed platypus in just a minute. So hopefully we got on with that okay, and you're feeling kind of in the good mammal mindset for what we're going to be looking at. So let's first of all go back to what those characteristics are that make mammals mammals. There are 4 things that a mammal has to have for it to be a mammal. The first thing is that all mammals have fur or hair at some stage in their development. So a lot of the mammals that we think of as mammals, you know, we can see that they are hairy or furry throughout their entire lives. But for things like our dolphin and our whales, that's not quite so obvious. Now, whales will often have small hairs over their body for their whole life. But things like dolphins, they are actually born with like a little beard. They've got a few small hairs on their chin they are born with that they lose in their first year of life. So not all mammals have to have hair for their entire lives, but they will have it for some stage. So that's why whales and dolphins still fall under the mammal category. So we also have the next second thing is that all mammals feed their young on milk. So that means they have mammary glands. The milk is secreted from these mammary glands that often have adapted to become teats. Now that's not always the case. We have a few exceptions to the rule. So our duck-billed platypus is an exception to that rule. It doesn't have a teat. It does have a mammary gland, but not a teat. And another animal called the echidna. These both live in Australia, and they actually secrete milk through their skin. The young have to lick it off, so they don't have a teat. The third thing is that all mammals are warm-blooded. So what that means is they create their heat, they generate their heat from inside their body, and they don't have to use the surroundings to keep themselves up. Whereas organisms like reptiles, they can't generate their own heat. They have to go out and bask in the sunshine to generate their own heat. So that's why you might see them on a warm stone wall sometimes. And the final thing is that all mammals give birth to live young. We do actually have, this is 99% true. We have 2 exceptions, and again, it's going back to our duck-billed platypus and our echidna. These are 2 mammals that live out in Australia. They actually lay eggs, but they still count as mammals. So if you need some fun facts to use for mammals with your young people, there's some good ones. Duck-billed platypus and the echidna kind of break the rules a little bit, and all the mammals that are in the UK follow the same rules. They have those 4 characteristics that make them mammals. What mammals do we potentially get in the UK? We have 107 different species of mammals that live in the UK, and they're incredibly varied. So some of the common species that you might see in your area, you might have bank voles, you might have wood mice, you might have squirrels, you might have either red or grey squirrels, depending on where you are. You might have hedgehogs, you might have rabbits and hares. If you live in a sort of more forested area, you might see deer, you might see roe deer or even fallow deer. Potentially, you might even see predators as well, so things like foxes and badgers, and maybe even otters if you're really lucky. They're a hugely diverse group of organisms, and actually, despite the fact they are quite elusive and shy, once you get your eye in and you know what to look for, you'll be amazed how many you can potentially see in your local space. They have adapted to live in all sorts of environments. They live in the middle of the city, they live out in the countryside, and there's absolutely excellent potential to develop sessions around mammals with young people in your local space. So that leads me on really nicely to introduce our main topic, our main video, Marvellous Mammals. The video will last for around 25 minutes or so, and it will include all the session ideas and the activities and things you can learn about. After that session finishes, you'll be brought back to me where I'll be answering your questions live. So feel free to submit those questions to that email address. That's questions@field-studies-council.org at any point throughout the video. So we hope you enjoy. Thanks very much. Mammals have adapted to live in all sorts of settings around the UK, including urban and built-up areas, so there really is potential to develop sessions around them wherever you are. Being able to identify and recognise evidence of mammals, whether it's paths in the grass or hair on a post, is a really useful thing to be able to work out where the mammals are, and it could also be turned into a session in itself with young people, almost a scavenger hunt for mammals. So it really is worth asking yourself the question of what mammals could I potentially have in my local area? There are so many signs to look out for evidence of mammal life, and it could be something as simple as a little track, running down a path. It could also be, disturbed vegetation, maybe like a sleeping area or a feeding area. You can always look for droppings, and you can look for hair. The limits really are endless, and the best thing is you don't have to be Bear Grylls to find them. Once you've had a little bit of practice and get your eye in, you'll be amazed how much you can pick up. Take, for example, walking along your local path or pavement. Once you start to look a little bit closer at the grassy verge you're walking alongside, you might start to notice things like tunnels or pathways. You can see the evidence of one just right behind me. So mammals, they do use regular pathways again and again, like the same way we do footpaths, and they do gradually wear them down. So when you can start to identify these tunnels, you can start to identify where mammals' habitats might be and what habits they go through, when they might use it and where. And what's really exciting is, particularly with young students, is you can follow these trails a lot of the time, and it can often lead to burrows or badger sets or other locations that have more evidence of mammal life and can be really exciting to find. Another really good way to look for evidence of mammals is by looking for their droppings. And along your walk, you may very easily start to pick up different types of droppings that correspond to different types of mammals. One type of mammal that we see evidence of really commonly around here using droppings is rabbits. So you'll probably be familiar with rabbit poo. It is round little pellets, not quite perfect spheres, but little small round pellets that are often laid in big clumps all around sort of open grassland and open vegetation.
Fun fact about rabbit poo is that rabbits actually poo twice. They do a first poo, which is not looking like this. It's a bit more clumped together. They then eat that poo again and then digest it a second time to get all the extra nutrients out of it, and then they poop out this second wave of poo. But clear large patches of rabbit poo like this can give you a really good indication that you've got lots of rabbit burrows around about your area, which is especially exciting for young students to see, or older students as well, if they're maybe, you know, grown up in the city and not had a lot of experience out in the countryside. As well as common species like rabbits, you'd be surprised how many really special species you can also get potentially in your area. In urban environments, foxes in particular have completely taken advantage of that whole new habitat and have done really well, and they can be incredible to see out in their own natural habitat in an urban or built up area, or even in your own garden. In terms of what we get here that's particularly special, we are really lucky in that we have some otters, Eurasian otters in this area. But again, if you're close to a freshwater or to a coastal environment, you might have them there yourself. One of the easiest ways to track these sort of special species is by looking for their droppings, but also looking for evidence like tracks and trails, as we did before. So with otters, their poo is normally a sort of cylindrical shape, but what makes it quite unique is that when you look a little bit closer at it, you can see all the bones of the fish and the different amphibians maybe that they've been eating, because they don't digest those and they pass through into the droppings. They supposedly also smell a little bit sweet, they're supposedly meant to smell a little bit of lavender, and this is completely up to you if you wanted to try that for yourself. But really be sure to check out and watch as you're walking along freshwater areas and look for these poos, because otter populations are on the increase, particularly in Scotland, and they are seen much more commonly in freshwater, and they've been sighted in Edinburgh canals and rivers in the centre of Glasgow as well, and Aberdeen too, so really do keep your eyes peeled. So one really cool session that you can do with both young and older students is to essentially dissect any poo or droppings or pellets that you find from an animal, because quite often things that the animal can't digest, like bones, particularly if it's a carnivore, will pass through the system and come out and be undigested in the poo itself, and you can pick through it and find out what the animal has been eating. So with otters, you can collect the poo itself, dry it out, and then pick through and find the bones there and then try and identify them. But you can also do it actually with some bird species as well. Owls in particular are known to cough up what's called pellets. So they cough up the hair and the bones of the small mammals that they've been eating, and again you can pick through them and ID them. Now the thing to obviously bear in mind is that if you're working with pellets or poo or anything like that, washing hands and gloves and things are absolutely essential. So once you've managed to identify some mammal hotspots in your area, it's time to delve a little bit deeper with your young people. And you can use other forms of techniques to work out more evidence or clearer evidence from your mammal life, or you can even actually humanely and ethically capture some small mammals for yourself. One technique that can be really, really cool to do with young and older students is by making a footprint tracking tunnel. So this is one example of one that we've made here. You can buy them online, but they're really easy to make yourself and can also kind of enhance the project for your young people as well. So essentially what they are is a sort of protected tube, if you like, and you can make a tube out of anything. We've used old squash bottles or diluting juice, covered over with some bin liner and kind of camouflaged with some leaves. So you have some kind of waterproof cover. Then in the middle you have sheets of plain paper, just plain white paper. But the key thing is in the middle you have some form of ink pad. Now it needs to be non-toxic for the animals, and again you can buy animal safe non-toxic ink online, or you can make an ink pad yourself using food colouring, old-fashioned stuff, not like fancy gel food colouring. Food colouring mixed with a bit of oil and then either soaked up in a sponge or just painted onto some sort of plastic bag or plastic coating. The last thing you need to do, you leave these out overnight with a little bit of bait. So you might want to use mealworms or some form of cat food if you're wanting to attract maybe hedgehogs or shrews, or you can leave just normal mammal food that you might feed to a hamster or guinea pig if you want to attract things like mice or squirrels or something like that, or rabbits. So you leave that food in the middle, and the idea is that your little mammal walks into the trap or walks into the tunnel, eats the food, but steps on the ink pad and then walks out and leaves its trails left on the paper behind. Most small mammals are nocturnal, so the best thing to do is leave these overnight, over multiple nights if you like, and wait and see the results in the next morning. And then you can remove the paper and then try and work out and identify what species you've had going through your tunnel that night. And FSC has created a guide to mammal footprints that can be purchased online, where you can try and ID the different species, from a hedgehog to a mouse to a vole. So this is our one that we set last night, and hopefully you can see there we do have some tracks that have been recorded. It looks like we've probably had a rat, or a common rat, going through these, and we've got our mealworms there. And this, you can see, obviously is our ink. So we've just used that mixture of food colouring and oil painted onto a little plastic bag, and this has worked perfectly. And even though this is homemade, we can still reuse it again and again. So we just take off the plastic, put down a fresh sheet of paper, and then it's good to go again. So this can be a fantastic activity for both young and older students. So the activity itself and all is almost twofold. There's the whole process of making the footprint tracking tunnel to begin with, which is a really cool art project and a nice way to bring sort of the outdoors in, but also the actual setting of it and the kind of analysis at the end, looking at those tunnels, is really, really good. The key thing to remember for health and safety side of things, particularly once these are set outside, is to make sure that thorough hand washing really is done. You never quite know what could have walked over your trap, or what could have put droppings or urine or anything like that. So thorough hand washing with hot soapy water after touching any used trap is really important. So another technique that you can do to really delve into the lives of small mammals, and that works really nicely for young and older students, is to do humane, ethical small mammal trapping. So there's a few different types of trap you can use, where the mammal stays overnight, it has all the facilities and all the things it needs to survive the evening. You then check the traps in the morning, have a really lovely close encounter with the animal, and then release it again safely back to its natural habitat. So to do this activity, you'll need some form of mammal trap, and there's a huge variety that you can get online, some more expensive than others. The two that we recommend, this first one is the BioEcos tube trap. So this is just plastic. They can be bought for about £20 per trap from an online website. And these are really nice to use with young students in particular. They're nice and straightforward and easy, and I'll talk you through how we use them in just a little minute. The other one that we also recommend is, this is the most traditional form of humane small mammal trapping, and it's called a long-width trap, and you can get them online as well. These are probably slightly more reliable in terms of trapping organisms, but they're just a tiny bit more fiddly. Now, small children or younger children can fill the traps themselves, but in terms of setting them up and attaching the tunnel, it's normally better to do that as an adult or for older students to use them. So the key thing with these two traps is that they both have a nest box structure. They come in two parts. They're a tunnel and a nest box. And how they work is, we fill our nest box with all the things that an animal needs to survive the night. So the key things, and this can bring in a really nice discussion, particularly with young students, is what can we do to make sure that this trapping is as good as possible for the small mammal that we are wanting to investigate. So it brings in conversations about welfare. But we need some form of bedding, so you can use hay or straw, or you can use shredded paper. We have an abundance of it at the centre, so we tend to use shredded paper, and we probably gear more towards hay in the winter time when it's a little bit colder. So as well as bedding, of course, food is one of the most important things. So we provide a few different sources of food. So we put in just normal kind of guinea pig or hamster food that you would get in any pet shop or any supermarket, because that includes all the key ingredients, all the key materials that any wild mouse or vole would eat out in the wild. However, it's not just herbivores that we might potentially capture in these small traps. We might also potentially catch insectivores as well. so particularly shrews, and they eat insects rather than vegetation. So it is very important to also include some form of insect life into your trap, and we tend to go with mealworms as being the best thing. Finally, you need to provide some form of moisture so the animal doesn't become dehydrated, but including just water in itself is really challenging because, you know, you can't really put a little bowl, you can't really exactly put a water feeder as you would with a captive animal because you don't know how to use it. So all you need to do is include some form of moist fruit. Apple tends to be the best thing, and you put a few cubes of there so that they can be hydrated for the evening. So as well as having a guide for the footprint, FSC has also created a guide for mammals in UK, so particularly land mammals in the UK. So this page here, you can see all the different small mammals potentially that we might get. Some of these small mammals only live in the south of England and we won't find in Scotland, but there's every potential that you could potentially get some of these in your area. The most common ones that we see are the wood mouse here, so they have a nice white undercolour, sort of a light brown back and then really rounded ears. Our bank voles down here, they're quite similar looking to mice in a way, but they're kind of almost a little bit chubbier, and they've got a shorter tail as well. And then you can see our shrews up at the top here. So the main thing to identify a shrew is that they've got a long pointed snout with really pronounced whiskers, and that's to help them sort of sniff out their insect prey. So we set a few traps last night, and fingers crossed that we had some animals to show you today, and we do, which is very exciting. So we've managed to get a few small wood mice. Now, when it comes to laying your trap, it's really important that you try and lay it in a hidden location or somewhere along the edge. So when small mammals like mice and voles move around, they always tend to keep to edges and they won't go out into open space to reduce their risk of predation. So when you're setting your trap, it's really key to try and get it hidden away, maybe even somewhere along a trail or a track that you might have found previously, because even if a larger mammal has made that trail or made that tunnel, chances are that small mammals will use it as well. As long as you have laid the trap in a nice quiet location, that definitely increases your chance of getting something. The other really important thing to remember when you lay your trap is you need to have some form of marker to make sure that you can find it again the next day. In the same ways with our footprint tracking tunnel, these are best laid overnight and then checked the next morning. However, make sure to not set them too early in the day. You want to aim for sort of late evening to then collect them early morning, normally around 9 o'clock, so that the mammals are not left in the trap for a long time. The key thing, as I said, make sure that it's marked with a flag or a cane or anything at all to make sure you can find it again the next morning. So the trickiest part really with mammal trapping is emptying the traps at the end and being careful and gentle with any animals you might have caught. So we never handle our animals, and we always recommend not to do so, just because it increases the stress level for the animal, and there really isn't the need to touch them. You know, we can see them close up enough, and the young people can still get a really good experience that way. So what we tend to do is we will open the traps inside a plastic bag, first of all, a nice big clear one. And then that gives us the flexibility, if you like, to then add the animal or move the animal to a box with a lid. And that box will have, you know, shredded paper or some form of bedding, whatever you've used to make it comfortable. And we'll also include a few bits of food there as well, just to keep them nice and comfortable and feel as secure as possible. Having it in the box then means that you can nice and securely allow your young people to get a good closer look at the animal. And we only tend to keep them in the box for maybe around 15-20 minutes, just to allow all the young people to get a good look and to bring in some discussions about animal adaptations or features or things that that animal has to help it survive in its environment and how it's different to us. And this is a conversation that you can have with young and older people as well. All right, come on. So just that close encounter with a live mammal that they've caught in the wild is an incredible experience for young and older students. This is a session that we run with all our age groups really that we have visiting to the centre, and I can guarantee you absolutely everyone enjoys it. I myself still get a little thrill every time you open a trap and find something there to look at. But if you want to expand this activity for young students, one of the ways to do it is by thinking about really focusing on the features that that animal has to survive. So looking at its ears, the size of its ears, the shape of its ears, the length of its tail, the colour of its fur. And there's lots of things that you can talk about there to discuss how that animal has adapted to live in its environment. And you could also potentially compare with other species, maybe in a tropical country, and compare, small mammals and small mice, and do a little experiment or a little study almost to see how the different animals have adapted to the different habitats, and talk about why Scotland is different to somewhere maybe a little bit warmer. For older students, you can almost do sort of population studies. You could look at, you could set your traps in different locations and try and work out where the hot spots are and do it again and again, and almost try and work out a little population size for how many small mammals you might have in your area. Alternatively, you could also bring mapping skills into it, and older students could plot on a map of your area where they found the mammals and almost try and maybe develop territories and see where the different areas are that they use and where there might be sort of potential conflicts maybe between different individuals. Now, as with the footprint tracking tunnels, one of the key measures for health and safety with this sort of session is hand washing. It's so important. Bites and things like that are very rare from these small mammals, of course. However, always be careful if you're the person that's unloading the trap. Keep your hands away as much as possible for just the benefit of the animal itself as well as you. The other thing to bear in mind in terms of group management is to make sure that you are being as quiet and as still as possible when you're opening these traps. They are incredibly flighty little animals, and they do manage to escape no matter how much you practice opening the traps. And that's okay, that can happen as long as you are opening the traps in a sort of sheltered, enclosed space where they can easily run away and hide and get some shelter. The important thing to remember with your young people is to make sure they're as quiet as possible, and also to make sure they are nice and still. So depending on your age group, if you are working with young students, you might choose just to have them sitting down to know and make sure that they are not going to be moving around. You might choose just to have them, statues, feet glued to the ground, they can't move at all. Because the worry is that if something does jump out and they move their foot and try and let it, move away, or there's a hubbub and there's a bit of excitement, is that the small mouse or small mammal will eventually get crushed. And of course, that is something we really do not want to happen. So group management at this point is very key. Always ensure that you can see them well and that they clearly understand what is required of them, and also why it's required of them as well. To understand that they are doing this thing to not hurt the mammal is really important. So to make this as an ethical a practice as possible, as well as only having the mammal in for a short space of time where it's got plenty of food and all the things it needs, we try and ensure that the animals are released to as close to the area where they were caught from as possible. So keeping that in mind is always really important, and of course making sure that all the traps are collected in at the end of the day. So counting out your traps and counting them in again is really important, because you don't want to leave any animals left in the trap which aren't then collected in again. But releasing them close to their habitat is really key, and releasing them also under cover so that no birds or anything can come down and catch them before they get into their safety. So there we have it, 3 straightforward, cost-effective ways to look for evidence of mammals in your local area. So it could be something as simple as looking for tracks and tunnels and droppings, maybe even dissecting the droppings at the end. It could be making a footprint tracking tunnel and leaving that out overnight and looking for evidence there. Or it could be setting your own small mammal traps and getting a really close encounter with those small mammals. So if this is something you really feel your young people would really benefit from, and if you have a little bit of extra money in the budget, there are some even further ways that you could delve into the lives of mammals in your area. One thing that can be really worthwhile to have a go at is purchasing a trail camera and using a trail camera in your local space. So these can cost stupid amounts of money, but you can also get them quite affordable sometimes from about £40 to £50 on the likes of Amazon, and even occasionally places like Lidl and Aldi will have them in that central aisle. But these work really nicely to set out overnight and again collect sort of information as they go through the night. So they're an automatic camera, so they have essentially tripwires coming off of them, and they detect movement. And when they detect some form of movement, they will start recording, and all cameras will either record photos or videos or both. So this is a thing you can use. If you know potential activity of mammals in your area, if you've got a particular tunnel or something, you can tie this to that spot, you leave it in that spot, leave it overnight, leave it over a couple of days, and it will continuously record when any movement sets it off. And they work in the daytime and nighttime, and they're weatherproof as well. So you can imagine the excitement of setting this out overnight and then checking it the next day. What potentially have you got from your camera? And again, you'll be amazed at what you can find that is going on at night time around your area that you never even knew was there. Foxes, hedgehogs, otters, deer, birds, even from getting away from mammals, they can be a really good investment. And if you look closely, you can find them for £40, £50 for certain locations. So one other one that does again require a little bit of investment but can be a really worthwhile kind of one-time purchase for a potential location that you're at is something called a bat detector. So bats are a mammal that we've not really discussed in this session because they're nocturnal and really hard to see sometimes. And to hear especially. But bat detectors are a way of kind of us tracking bats and listening to bats in our local space. So bats use a method of navigation called echolocation, where they create these really high-pitched clicks that we can't hear. But those clicks then bounce off of an object or bounce off of a food source, and then they hear the echo, and that's how they build up a picture of the world around them. Now, it is too high-pitched for us to hear, but what a bat detector does is it lowers the sound down to a level that we can hear, and then kind of spits it back out again in the speaker. So when you're walking around at dusk, particularly in the summertime like this, you can often hear bats echolocating in your area. And bats are really common. You'll find them around all sorts of locations. We have them here. You'll find them in houses and gardens and cities a lot of the time. So it can be a really nice way to allow young people to get sort of in touch with bats and allow them to see that they are in their area as well. So these are a little bit more expensive than the trail camera. They normally retail about £60 per bat detector, depending on where you look. But they can be a really worthwhile thing to invest in if you think it's something that your young people would be really into, because they provide that really close encounter with a mammal that they maybe have never had much of a connection with before.
Okay, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that. There are some really cost-effective, engaging and easy ways to develop outdoor learning to do with mammals with your young people in your local space. As you can see, we gave up on the weather, so hopefully we'll be presenting from outside again tomorrow, but the rain got the better of us today. So in a minute, I'll be answering some of your questions live. But you've still got time to submit any questions that you have after that video. You can email them over to questions@field-studies-council.org. So feel free to email your questions over. But first of all, before we answer those questions, we're going to have a little talk about how you might make your local space more friendly for mammal life. So the biggest threats that are facing mammals today are habitat loss and habitat fragmentation. So what that means is their habitat, the spaces where they live, are essentially being destroyed for other purposes. But on top of that, the habitats that they've got left have become really disconnected. So what happens is you have these small patches of suitable habitat that are spaced across an area that mammals can use, but there's no way for those spaces to connect. They can't travel between those different areas. So they can't find new food sources, and they also can't find new mates, so the reproduction rates decrease. So these two problems are very bad for mammals for us in the UK at the moment. So one of the best things that we can do to help mammals in your local space is to provide them with a little bit of extra habitat. And one of the simplest and easiest ways to do that is to let a bit of space grow just a little bit wild in your area. So maybe decreasing the amount of mowing that you're doing, or potentially planting more plants in the area, or having more potted plants in your area. Just creates such a much better habitat for mammals to survive in, because the minute you stop mowing, that allows the vegetation to grow taller, so it creates more shelter for small mammals like our mice and our voles, but also it creates potential more food sources as well, because once you stop mowing, more plant species are able to establish themselves. There's more opportunity for seeds and leaves and flower buds that they can then eat. So that's massively useful for small mammals. Also things like kind of avoiding harsh chemicals in your garden area or your green space, so maybe not using slug pellets or weed killer. Again, just creates a much more natural habitat for small mammals to survive in. So that can be really, really useful. The other things you can do is you can also put out food and water for your, and potentially actually habitats and homes for mammals as well. So in terms of water, that's really, really easy. All you need to do is leave a shallow dish or shallow bowl out in your local space, as long as it's nice and shallow, so that obviously nothing falls in. That can be a really good way just to take some stresses off for our mammal species. In terms of food, there's a huge range of different things you can put out. Sometimes even just putting a bird feeder out can massively or indirectly impact small mammals in a good way, because all of the seeds and nuts that the birds can eat from the feeders fall to the ground, and then the small mammals can eat them. So often you'll find bank voles and field voles living underneath feeders, taking advantage of those. In terms of other food you can put out, small mammal food, like you saw in the video there, you can leave out. You can also leave out your insects as well, so things like mealworms will be snapped up very quickly. But also if you're wanting to target things like hedgehogs, actually leaving cat food out, a small little bowl of cat food can be really good for hedgehogs in particular. In terms of habitats that you can create for your small mammals, something as simple as pile-rolled logs can be really, really good for small mice and things and voles, because that creates that habitat for them where they can survive. And by leaving old wood kind of rotting down, that allows more insects to survive, and again, then more food for something like a shrew to be able to survive as well. Now, if you want a sort of larger scale project, something you can do which helps one of our species of mammal in the UK that's in the biggest decline is our hedgehogs. Now, you can create a hedgehog home that you can leave in your local space, and it's essentially like a little hutch. And there's some really good guides available online from likes of RSPB and the Wildlife Trust as to how to make those boxes. But it's essentially just a little hutch you put out in your local space, and often hedgehogs will use that over the summertime when they're maybe having young, and they'll kind of use that as their nest for during the daytime, and then they'll come out and forage at night. So that can be a really fantastic way to help, particularly things like hedgehogs. But the benefit really is, once you kind of maybe let a space grow a little wild and you start to get small mammals or more vegetation, that then makes it a much better place potentially for your larger mammals as well. So more vegetation, you might get deer in your area. And if you do have a good population of small mammals, lots of mice, you might end up getting things like foxes as well, which is fantastic to see. So those are some really good ones there. In terms of helping the habitat fragmentation side of things, one of the really easy ways that you can help kind of connect different dots, connect different habitats for mammals, is to essentially create corridors in your space. So that can be something as simple as you've got a fence or a hedge, just leaving like a little archway or a little hole underneath at the bottom of the fence. That just allows mammals to travel between potentially different gardens, different green spaces. Because when it's an impenetrable fence without a big gap underneath, they just can't make it through. So something as simple as a little archway underneath can be really, really beneficial. In terms of resources online where you can get more information about mammals or potentially more session ideas, the Mammal Society website and also the Wildlife Trust's website are excellent sources of information. So they give you loads of information about individual species of mammals that you might get in your area, as well as other activity ideas that you might want to do with young people. In terms of apps and sort of projects that you can look into, there's an app called Mammal Mapper, which is really, really good. So what you can do, if you manage to see some mammals in your area with your young people, you can upload that sighting onto this app, and that records it in your area as a mammal that's been sighted. So not only can you sort of contribute to a larger picture, record of mammals in your area, it's also a really useful resource to potentially, if you've got no idea where to start in terms of looking for mammals in your area, you can log on to that app and look at where mammals have been sighted around your local space. So it's a good place to start. So that app, Mammal Mapper, there is a really good one to go for. Okay. So I think we will now probably move on to our questions. So I'll ask Lorraine here. Do we have any questions that I can live answer just now?
So our first one is, once you've caught a mammal, how long could you keep it before you need to release it?
Okay, cool. So if you didn't hear that, our first question is, if you catch a mammal using that humane mammal trapping technique, how long should you hold on to it for? So in terms of timings, really ultimately you want to be doing it you want to be having that mammal in a box or in the trap for as little time as possible. Now that's very broad. Generally what we do when we do mammal trapping, we set our traps around 7, 8 o'clock at night and then collect them in again at 9 o'clock the next morning. We wouldn't recommend doing that setting them any earlier than that. It's just a very, very long time for the mammal to be in a small space. So around about that time frame of sort of 7, 8 o'clock in the evening, collecting at 9 o'clock in the morning. And then once you've actually got the mammal, got it in the box itself, again, you don't really want to be holding on to it for a long time. You want to make the session useful and you want young people to be able to see the mammal and kind of engage with it properly. But really, around about 15, 20 minutes would be the maximum time that we would suggest. And of course, as we said in the video before, don't handle the mammal and at least sit close to your local area or the space that you caught it in as possible to make sure it's under cover as well. Okay.
So how do you find owl pellets?
Oh, that's a good question. So if you want to do a bit of research into the tracking side of things with mammals or other animals as well, so owl pellets are those things that they cough up and they leave behind the bones and hair and things. So it's quite similar to what you could do with mammal droppings, is you could kind of pick them apart. You tend to find those in a variety of places, and it kind of depends a little bit on the owl species. So often what will happen is owls will have particular spots where they choose to rest and choose to kind of cough up their pellets. It's not very nice, but they do. So what you can look for, often they will rest on posts that are maybe lining fences or along the edge of a wall, and they'll rest there, and that's where they'll cough them up. So you'll never just find one pellet by itself. You find them in big clumps. But looking underneath posts and lamp posts and things, and telephone wires can be quite good. And you can sometimes identify the posts because of whitewashing. So again, as I said, they use the same posts again and again. But whitewashing essentially means they'll poo all over their post that they choose to cough up their pellets from. So even from a distance, sometimes you can identify a post that's maybe been used quite regularly by that whitewashing, and then hopefully you can find pellets underneath. So that's quite common for things like tawny owls and short-eared owls. Barn owls, as the name suggests, they do tend to nest inside in old kind of buildings and barns, so sometimes going out for a look around there can be also really good as well for finding those pellets. It's really good owl pellets, definitely do it. Any other questions?
What other benefits to students do you see when mammal trapping?
So that question there was, what other benefits do we see from mammal trapping with young people? It's a huge, huge range of benefits, I would say. And as I said before, we do this with young students and we do this with older students as well. So for older students, some of the key benefits is they gain really good sort of scientific investigation skills. When we do it with young people, when we do it with older students, we think about how to make a fair study and how you might kind of replicate the study in different locations and how to gain valid conclusions from your study. So we're really kind of taking it down quite a scientific approach there. But the biggest benefit, I think, with the mammal trapping for all ages is just that close contact and that close experience with a small mammal that they've potentially never seen before. For young students, one of the biggest benefits can be the welfare discussion. So, you turn it into a huge project, for them, and they've got to come up with what can they potentially do to make this a good experience for mammals. And it just gets them really thinking about the fact that it is a small mammal that they are responsible for, a small life that they are responsible for. So considering all these factors of shelter and food and, leaving a marker out before they collect the trap again so they know where to collect it from, and just all these little things really add up to a sense of responsibility for the young people. And again, just the benefit of actually seeing the animal in real life. You know, often mice and things like that are something that we kind of, you know, freak out a little bit and we don't like very much. But actually they're a really important animal for a functioning ecosystem. So yeah, that welfare side of things, but also just that close contact with an animal that they've never really had potential contact with before is really, really beneficial. And there's ways to expand it. Yeah, you know, you don't have to take it down a scientific route. You can expand it into art and literacy. You can do drawings, you can label annotations and descriptions and things for that animal, and you can create really interesting art pieces as well. So there's loads of ways you can expand it, but there's so many benefits too.
And so this is the last question.
Okay.
Is it only small mammals like mice that you can get inside the small traps?
Usually, yes. So I've been here for about 3 years now at the centre, and whenever we've been doing small mammal trapping, it has only been small mammals. We have had mice, we have had voles, and we have had the occasional shrew as well. So we've never had anything else, and we do have a lot of rats around here. We are on an island, so we do have lots of rats, and they've never made it into the traps, thankfully. So normally the traps are just too small for anything larger, so things like hedgehogs, rats or squirrels. So it's very, very unlikely that you would ever get anything else. I don't want to say 100%, definitely not, but 99% very, very unlikely. Okay, all right, so we'll finish up with the questions there. We're almost out of time, don't want to keep you guys too long. But finally, we're going to round off with, for each session, I'm going to be giving you guys a little bit of homework that myself and your colleagues at Barnardos would absolutely love for you to partake in and have a little go at. So your homework for this session, we would like you to go out into your local space and identify 3 different signs for mammal life in your area. And it can be something that we talked about in this video. It can be tracks and trails, or it could be droppings or things like that. But we'd like you to look for 3 different signs of mammal life in your area. And then the other thing we'd like you to do is we would like you to make your very own footprint tracking tunnel out of just things that you have in your house or in your service. Okay, so making that out of plastic bottles, coverings, food colouring and oil mixed together, and we would like to see your footprint tracking tunnel. So where you can share your progress from your homework is our Padlet website. So if you look to the description, the link, the bio for this video, you'll find a link there to this Padlet website. So we've set this up not only for you to share your progress, but also to share a range of resources and links that we've talked about in these videos that you can use. So make sure to check out that website. There's a huge range of different links. There's, you know, ideas for hedgehog homes, and there's a license that you might want to consider if you're going to be doing mammal trapping. There's a whole range of different things. So make sure to check that out. And then you can also upload, as I said, your progress from your homework. So photos and ideas and things that you've come up with. Because one of the best things with outdoor learning when you're all trying it together is there's so much idea exchanging that can go on. You know, one person will have an idea, another person, and you know, there's no limits as to what you can do. So do please make sure you're sharing what you're doing on that website, and get talking to each other, and have a go with using these with your young people yourself. But for that, that's the end of our session today. Thank you so much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed this first session and that you've already got some ideas that you might want to use with your own young people back in your local space. We'll be at the same time again tomorrow, so 10:30 for our second session, which is the world on your doorstep. We'll be looking at orienteering, navigation, and place setting activities. But that is tomorrow, 10:30. Otherwise, I will see you then. Thank you very much.